In the summer of 1953, a 12-year-old boy named Jerry Anderson vanished for 7 hours during a summer camp somewhere in the English countryside. When he was finally found, he had no memory of where he'd been or what had happened to him. It would take 25 years, a string of UFO sightings, and a session of hypnotic regression before the full story came to the surface. And when it did, what Jerry described was as disturbing as it was familiar, because many of the details he recalled would mirror alien abduction accounts reported by other people in other countries across other decades. The story first came to wider attention through the book Without Consent, written by veteran UFO researchers Philip Mantle and Carl Nagaitis, and it is from their research that the following account is drawn. It began, or rather it was first triggered, sometime in the 1960s. Jerry was out with his wife in London when he spotted a strange light moving through the sky. The sighting was brief, but it was enough to stir something buried deep in his memory, fragments of an experience from his childhood that he had almost entirely forgotten. And the sightings didn't stop there. Over the years that followed, Jerry continued to witness UFOs even after he relocated to Ontario, Canada. Each sighting seemed to pull a little more of that old memory closer to the surface, though it never fully came through on its own. The original incident took place during a summer camp outing in 1953, when Jerry was just 12 years old. While the other children were playing hide and seek, supervised by their teacher, a man named Mr. Rice, Jerry had quietly slipped away from the group. He made his way into a secluded patch of woodland, wanting a moment to himself. He lay down among the trees and lit a cigarette. Before long, he drifted off to sleep, or at least that's what he believed had happened. The next thing Jerry knew, Mr. Rice was standing over him, demanding to know where he had been. Jerry was confused. As far as he was concerned, he had simply dozed off. But it quickly became clear that something was very wrong. He had been missing for 7 hours. It was now 8 o'clock in the evening. Mr. Rice told him that he and the rest of the group had spent several hours searching for him. Stranger still, they had already searched the exact spot where Jerry was found lying. He hadn't been there before, and yet Jerry had no memory of having moved at all. He was taken to see a doctor shortly after. The back of his neck was noticeably red, and he was visibly exhausted. The diagnosis was a mild case of sunstroke. At the time, that seemed to explain things well enough. Life moved on, and the incident faded into the background of Jerry's memory, until those UFO sightings, first in London and then in Canada, began pulling it back. By 1978, still unable to piece together what had really happened that day, Jerry decided to seek help. He found a hypnotherapist who agreed to regress him back to the age of 12, to that afternoon he had disappeared in the woods. What came out of that session was remarkable. Under hypnosis, Jerry did not simply fall asleep after lighting his cigarette. Instead, he recalled noticing a strange light in the sky above him. He watched as it moved through the air and appeared to land somewhere in the woodland nearby. Several moments passed. Then, through the trees, he saw 2 strange figures approaching him. Fear began to take hold. It intensified when Jerry realized he could not move. He was completely paralyzed, pinned to the ground, unable to so much as lift an arm. The harder he tried to break free, the more frightened he became. The figures continued toward him, and as they drew closer, a voice appeared inside his mind. It told him there was no need to be afraid. The 2 creatures reached him and positioned themselves on either side of his body. They reached down toward him, and then Jerry began to float. He rose up through the air, and as he did, he could see the bright lights of the object that had landed in the woods only minutes earlier. By the time he was close to the craft, he appeared to have regained the use of his limbs. A ladder hung down from the object, and the voice, or perhaps a new instruction, told him to climb it. Before he did, Jerry took a moment to look at his captors. What he described would be instantly recognisable to anyone familiar with modern abduction reports. The creatures were shorter than he was, with pale grey skin and disproportionately large eyes. They matched almost exactly what is now commonly referred to as the grey alien, a description that would not become part of mainstream culture until years after Jerry's original experience in 1953. He turned back toward the ladder and began to climb. As he did, he felt a distinct pressure on the back of his neck. He couldn't tell exactly what it was, but he had the impression it was being deliberately applied by the creatures who had brought him there. This detail is worth noting, as the redness on his neck, the very symptom the doctor had attributed to sunstroke, now seemed to have a very different explanation. Once inside, Jerry found himself in a round-shaped room. It was brightly lit, but he couldn't identify the source of the light. It seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once, as though the walls and ceiling themselves were glowing. This is a detail that shows up with striking regularity across alien abduction reports, the sourceless, ambient light that fills the interior of the craft. After a short time, the two creatures led Jerry into a second room. Inside was another figure, but this one was different. It was dressed in red clothing and appeared to be older than the others. When it spoke, again the communication seemed to take place inside Jerry's mind rather than through sound. It addressed him as "my son." Jerry got the impression that this figure held some kind of authority over the others, perhaps a leader or commander of some sort. The figure in red then directed Jerry's attention to a screen on which a small globe was displayed. Jerry was told that what he was looking at was Earth. The realization hit him with force, and the fear that had briefly subsided came rushing back. He was no longer on the ground. He was somewhere else entirely, looking down at his own planet from a place he couldn't comprehend. The figure in red seemed to sense his distress. It reached out and placed a hand on Jerry's head. The effect was immediate. A deep calm washed over him, replacing the panic almost instantly. It was as if the fear had been switched off. While Jerry was still absorbing this sudden shift in his emotional state, the craft appeared to come to a stop. The figure in red gestured for him to follow. Jerry did as he was told and found himself walking down a long ramp that led deeper into the structure. When he reached the bottom, a large door opened in front of him, revealing an enormous domed room beyond. What he saw inside stopped him cold. The room was full of children. Jerry stood there, staring into the domed chamber, trying to make sense of what he was seeing. Then the figure in red handed him a strange globe-like object. As it did, the words "understand, be taught" entered his mind. No further explanation was given. The figure then withdrew, leaving Jerry alone. He began to look around the room. As he did, he noticed that a woman had appeared. She walked toward him and reached for the small cross hanging on a chain around his neck. She examined it closely. Then the figure in red reappeared. It too studied the cross. And once again, a message came through, not spoken aloud, but planted directly into Jerry's thoughts. The message was simple and direct. it is not right to worship. Jerry was then directed to watch a screen nearby. He did as instructed, though what was shown to him was not something he could clearly recall. Within what felt like only moments, he was falling asleep again. When he woke, he was back in the woods, but he wasn't lying where he had been before. He was being carried gently by the same two grey-skinned creatures who had first approached him. They placed him carefully on the ground, back at the exact spot where they had originally found him. And then they were gone. Jerry fell asleep once more. The next thing he knew, Mr. Rice was standing over him, asking where he had been all this time. The account Jerry Anderson gave under hypnotic regression is, by any measure, one of the more detailed and compelling alien abduction claims to come out of the United Kingdom. But what makes it particularly interesting is not just the story itself, it's how closely it lines up with other reported encounters from around the world, many of which took place years or even decades after Jerry's experience. The grey-skinned beings, the paralysis, the floating, the sourceless light inside the craft, the telepathic communication, the screen showing Earth. These are all recurring elements in abduction literature, and Jerry described them long before many of these motifs had become widely known. Then there are the more unusual details, the figure in red, the room full of children, the instruction to understand, be taught, and the pointed remark that worship was wrong. The presence of so many children, combined with the figure in red referring to Jerry as "my son," has led some researchers to speculate about the possibility of a hybridization program, an idea that sounds outlandish on its surface, but one that appears in a surprising number of similar accounts on record. The claim that worship is not right is also notable. While a handful of close encounter reports do reference some kind of supreme being or higher power, many others, like Jerry's, seem to push back against the very concept of organised religion. Some have suggested that a civilization advanced enough to travel between stars would likely have moved beyond the worship of deities, grounding their understanding of existence in science, even if that science is beyond our current comprehension. Of course, the account rests heavily on hypnotic regression, and that is where much of the skepticism lies. There are legitimate questions about whether memories retrieved under hypnosis are genuine recollections or constructions shaped by suggestion, expectation, or cultural influence. There is no physical evidence to support Jerry's claims, and no official documentation of the original 1953 incident beyond his own testimony. But whether one believes Jerry Anderson's account or not, it remains one of the most striking and detailed abduction reports on file, and one that, if even partially true, raises deeply uncomfortable questions about what else might be happening around us, just beyond the edges of what we're able to remember.